I don't even know how to start this without sounding totally insane, but here goes. The guy who just knocked on my door with a pizza that wasn't mine ended up asking to come inside. And somehow, that was just the beginning of the strangest night I've had in a long time. So picture this. It's Friday night, I'm home alone in my tiny apartment. After a long week, I had finally gotten around to ordering dinner. Just some cheap, greasy pizza because, honestly, I wasn't in the mood to cook or even think about food. I was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through my phone and half watching some random show I've already seen a million times. Then, out of nowhere, there's a knock at the door. Pretty normal, right? I wasn't expecting anyone. No friends, no delivery. But hey, maybe the pizza guy was just early. I shuffle over, open the door, and there's this guy standing there holding a pizza box out to me with this slightly confused smile. Except, it's definitely not my pizza. I mean, I know what I ordered, and this pie looks nothing like it. I glance at the receipt stuck to the box, and sure enough, it's got someone else's name on it. I'm about to tell him he's got the wrong place when he looks at me, kind of hesitates, and then says, "Hey, I'm really sorry to bother you, but my phone died and my GPS went haywire, and I swear I'm just trying to figure this out. Mind if I come in for a sec to charge my phone? I've got to call this person and let them know their pizza's here." I blinked. Usually, I wouldn't even consider letting a random stranger off the street into my apartment, but there was something about him. Maybe the way he looked a little lost, or maybe just the awkwardness in his voice that made me hesitate. So here I am, standing in my doorway, holding this wrong pizza in one hand, wondering whether I just agreed to let a total stranger inside. It was that kind of moment where everything feels like it's about to go sideways, or maybe, just maybe, something way more interesting than a simple Friday night dinner. And honestly, at that moment, I had no idea what was coming next. I swallowed hard and nodded, stepping aside to let him in. He smiled, kind of sheepishly, and ducked into my apartment, closing the door behind him. The place wasn't much. Small living room, a cluttered desk by the window, a couch that's seen better days, but it was home. And suddenly, it felt a little less empty. "Thanks," he said, pulling out his phone to plug it into the charger sitting on the coffee table. "I'm really sorry about the mix-up. My name's Jamie, by the way." I introduced myself, mostly because it felt weird not to. We stood there for a second, both a little awkward. He was a little taller than me, with messy dark hair and these eyes that looked like they'd seen a lot but still had a spark of something hopeful. He had on a leather jacket, which seemed a bit out of place for a pizza delivery guy, or whoever he was supposed to be. So I asked, "Wait, you're delivering pizza? Because you don't exactly look like a delivery driver." Jamie laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that made you want to hear more. No, I'm actually helping out a friend. They work for the place. I was supposed to just drop off this pizza at his apartment, but I took a wrong turn or something and ended up here." I raised an eyebrow. "So you don't know where your friend lives?" He shrugged, cheeks coloring a bit. "Not really. I'm new in town. Just moved here a couple weeks ago and still figuring things out." That made sense. Maybe. I mean, I'd been here long enough to know the neighborhoods pretty well, but I could see how someone new might get turned around. Especially if your phone died right when you were trying to find an address. We both fell silent for a moment. The kind of quiet that's not uncomfortable but kind of full, like it's waiting for something to happen. Jamie looked around, taking in the apartment, then back to me. So he said, "Since I'm here, maybe I could hang out for a bit while this charges?" I promise I'm not some creeper or anything. I laughed, partly because it was ridiculous, and partly because I found myself actually wanting to say yes. I mean, I was alone and bored, and Jamie seemed different, more real than the usual small talk I get at work or the shallow conversations with people online. "Sure," I said. "Why not?" "But no funny business." He grinned. "Deal." We moved over to the couch, Jamie setting the pizza box on the coffee table. I was still holding my own pizza, which I'd completely forgotten about until now. "So, what kind of pizza did you order?" he asked, curious. "Just pepperoni," I said. "Nothing fancy." "You?" Some weird veggie combo," he admitted, a little embarrassed. "I'm not really a pizza person, but my friend insisted." I laughed again. and suddenly the weirdness of the night was starting to feel a little less awkward, and a lot more like the beginning of something unexpected. As we talked, Jamie told me about moving here for a new job, how he didn't really know anyone yet, and how he was trying to rebuild after some not-so-great stuff back home. There was something honest in his voice, like he wasn't trying to impress or hide anything, just telling me what was real. I shared some stuff too, about my own job, my own failed attempts at dating, the usual "I'm just trying to figure things out" stuff. It felt nice to talk without the usual filters, you know? Like we were just two guys stuck in the middle of a Friday night, trying to make sense of it all. After a while, Jamie glanced at his phone, which had finally hit a decent charge. "Looks like I should get going," he said, standing up reluctantly. "I really appreciate you letting me crash here for a bit." "Yeah, no problem," I said, standing too. "Hope you find your friend's place soon." He smiled, that same shy, hopeful smile. "Me too." And then, just as he reached for the door, he turned back and said, "Hey, maybe we could do this again sometime?" Like, not because of pizza mix-ups. I blinked, caught off guard but kind of thrilled. "Yeah," I said, smiling. "I'd like that." He nodded, and then he was gone, leaving me standing there with two pizzas, one wrong, one mine, and this weird, warm feeling I hadn't expected when the night started. I closed the door and leaned against it, thinking maybe sometimes the wrong pizza delivery is exactly what you need. After Jamie left, I stood there for a long time, just staring at the closed door like I was expecting it to open again. Weird, right? But something about him sticking around, even just for a few minutes, left this strange kind of buzz in the air. I looked down at the two pizzas on my coffee table and thought, well, I guess I'm eating twice tonight. I grabbed my pepperoni slice, sat back on the couch, and took a bite, but honestly, the pizza tasted like cardboard compared to what was swirling inside my head. Thoughts of Jamie, his eyes, the way he laughed, the way he looked, just a little lost but still hopeful, kept nudging me. It was the kind of feeling you don't get every day, and I wasn't ready to let it go. The next morning, I woke up with that fluttery feeling still lingering, like the kind you get after one of those moments that feel small but mean a lot. I checked my phone, half expecting a text from Jamie. Nothing. I told myself not to get my hopes up, but Simon, he'd asked to hang out again. That has to count for something, right? Days passed. I kept thinking about calling him, but I wasn't even sure if I had the right number. We'd exchanged numbers when he was here, but I hadn't saved it properly. Typical me. Then, just when I was about to give up, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Jamie. Hope it's okay to text you. I'm probably the worst at this whole new town thing. Maybe coffee sometime?" I grinned so wide I probably looked ridiculous. I quickly typed back, "Definitely. I know a great place nearby. How about tomorrow afternoon?" He replied almost instantly. Perfect. That evening, I couldn't focus on much else. I kept picturing what it'd be like to actually get to know him beyond the accidental pizza delivery and awkward room charging moment. The idea of Jamie sitting across from me at a cafe talking about his life, his hopes, his struggles, it felt real. And honestly, a little exciting. The next day, I found myself pacing outside the coffee shop a few minutes early. When Jamie walked through the door, I nearly forgot how to breathe. He looked different in daylight, less like the nervous guy from my apartment, and more like someone who belonged anywhere he wanted. His smile was the same, though. Warm and a little shy, we ordered coffee and settled into a corner booth. Conversation came easy, like we were picking up parts of a story that had been paused before it even started. Jamie talked about his move, about how scary it was to start over in a new place where you don't know anyone. I shared some stuff about my own loneliness, the weird pressure to have everything figured out by now. At some point, he reached across the table and lightly touched my hand. My heart did a little flip I'd been ignoring since the pizza incident. "I'm glad I knocked on your door that night," he said softly. "Me too," I admitted. We stayed there for hours, talking and laughing until the cafe started closing. When we finally stepped outside, the city lights cast a soft glow around us. Jamie hesitated, then asked, "Want to walk a bit?" I'm not quite ready to say goodbye. That walk turned into a slow meander through the quiet streets, sharing stories about our families, old friends, and silly mistakes. I found myself opening up more than I had in a long time, and he listened like it mattered. When we finally stopped outside my building, Jamie looked up at me with those eyes that made everything else blur away. So he said, "Can I actually come in next time you order pizza? I promise I'll get it right." I laughed, feeling that buzz again. "Only if you promise to stay even when the pizza's correct." He smiled and leaned in just enough for me to catch his breath. Deal. And just like that, the wrong pizza delivery turned into the start of something I never saw coming. Life's weird like that sometimes. You think it's just another Friday night, and then it surprises the hell out of you. After that night, things started unfolding in a way that felt both thrilling and kind of terrifying, like stepping off a cliff and hoping there was something soft down below. Jamie and I kept texting, grabbing coffee, sometimes just wandering the city without any plan. Every time we met, it felt like we were digging a little deeper, peeling back layers of who we really were. One weekend, he invited me over to his place, a tiny apartment a few blocks from mine that looked like it had been lived in by someone who cared about simple things, but hadn't quite figured out how to make a space feel like home yet. There were unpacked boxes in the corner and a few mismatched pieces of furniture, but what caught my attention were the photos on the wall. Snapshots of a life he'd left behind, smiling faces, places I hadn't been. I realized just how new this whole city was to him, how much he was starting over. We sat on his couch, a little awkward at first, the kind of quiet that isn't empty but waiting. I noticed a book on the coffee table, a worn copy of one of my favorite novels. "Hey, I didn't know you liked this," I said. He shrugged, eyes lighting up. "Yeah, it's kind of a comfort thing. Makes me feel less alone, I guess." That hit me harder than I expected. "I get that," I said softly. Jamie looked over and smiled, but there was a flicker of something deeper in his eyes. Vulnerability, maybe. "Thanks for being around," he said. Before I could say anything, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then sighed. "It's my friend, the one I was supposed to deliver pizza for that night. Turns out, he got caught up with some family stuff and didn't even realize the pizza was missing." I laughed, imagining the chaos. "So you were just the accidental hero?" He grinned. "Something like that." The conversation drifted to less serious things. Music, favorite movies, dumb things we'd done when we were younger. But beneath the surface, I could feel this steady current of connection growing between us. It wasn't just the novelty of meeting someone new. It was the realness of it. The way Jamie looked at me made me want to be better, to open up more than I usually did. A few nights later, I found myself lying on my couch replaying our conversations in my head. Was this what falling for someone felt like? Because if it was, I wasn't sure I'd been ready before. But now I wanted it. Then came the first time we kissed. It was after a late-night movie at my place. We'd been sitting close on the couch, half watching the credits roll, when Jamie shifted slightly and looked at me with those eyes I couldn't read. I took a chance, leaned in, and it was like everything snapped into focus. The way his lips were soft but sure, the warmth radiating from him. It was messy and a little awkward, but perfect in its own way. When we pulled apart, I whispered, "I've been wanting to do that since you first knocked on my door with the wrong pizza." Jamie laughed, the sound full of relief and something like hope. "Me too." After that, we started spending more and more time together. Weekdays were still work and routine, but weekends, they became ours. Sometimes we'd cook dinner. Usually him, because he actually knows how to use a stove. And other times we'd just order in, making sure to double-check whose pizza was whose. There were moments when things felt fragile, like when Jamie talked about the mess he left behind in his old life, or when I admitted I'd been scared to let anyone in for a long time. But those moments made us stronger, not weaker. We weren't perfect, but we were honest, and that made all the difference. One evening, as we sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker, Jamie turned to me and said, "You know, I wasn't sure about this whole moving thing, about starting over, but meeting you, it's made everything feel possible." I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "Same here." We stayed like that for a while, just two people leaning on each other, finding something real in the chaos. And maybe that's what love is, showing up when you're scared, knocking on the right doors, even if you get the pizza wrong the first time. That night on the balcony felt like a turning point. The kind of moment where you realize you're no longer just two people passing through each other's lives, but something more, something worth holding on to. I could see it in Jamie's eyes too. There was a softness there that hadn't been there before, a hint of trust that felt like a quiet promise. A few days later, I found myself standing outside his apartment, nervously tapping my foot. We had planned to go for a walk along the river, a little escape from the usual city buzz. I wasn't exactly known for my smooth moves, but Jamie had this way of making even the simplest plans feel exciting, like an adventure waiting to happen. When he opened the door, his smile caught me off guard. "Hey," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "Hey," I replied, feeling my nerves settle just being near him. His place was a bit more put together now. Boxes unpacked, a few plants on the windowsill, string lights twinkling softly. It was like he was slowly making it his own, and I liked that. Liked the idea of being part of that process, even in a small way. We grabbed our jackets and headed out, the crisp air wrapping around us as we walked side by side. The river was peaceful, the city's skyline reflected in the water below. We didn't talk much at first, just letting the silence stretch comfortably between us. Then Jamie stopped and looked at me, his breath visible in the cool night air. You ever think about how random life is? Like one wrong pizza delivery, and suddenly you're walking along a river with someone you barely knew a month ago? I laughed, nodding. Yeah, it's crazy, but I'm glad it was wrong. He reached for my hand, fingers intertwining with mine. Me too. There was something about his touch that made my heart race, but not in the panicky way love at first sight movies show. It was steadier, like coming home after a long trip. As we walked, Jamie started opening up more about his past, about how he'd left behind a relationship that didn't feel right anymore, about the fear of starting fresh in a city where he knew no one. I listened, the usual walls I kept up slowly crumbling. When it was my turn, I told him about my own struggles, how I'd spent years trying to fit into a mold that wasn't me, how I'd been scared to trust anyone with the parts of me I thought were too broken. He didn't blink or judge. Instead, he squeezed my hand a little tighter. At one point, we found a bench overlooking the water and sat down. The city lights shimmered, and for a moment, it was just us and the quiet hum of the world around. Jamie turned to me and said, "I feel like I'm finally starting to figure out who I am, and having you here makes it less scary." I smiled, feeling the weight of those words settle deep inside. I know what you mean. It's like we're both rebuilding, but maybe together we can build something better. He looked at me then, eyes searching, and I saw the question hanging there without words. Was I ready for that? To take a chance on something real? Something lasting? I leaned in and kissed him. Soft, slow, like I was trying to memorize every detail. When we pulled apart, Jamie's smile was brighter than the city lights. "Let's keep building," I whispered. Those weeks turned into months, and with every day, Jamie and I grew closer. We found comfort in the little routines. Late night talks, Sunday morning pancakes, stolen kisses in the kitchen. We weren't perfect. We argued about silly stuff sometimes, like whose turn it was to do the dishes or which movie to watch. But every disagreement ended with a laugh or a hug, the kind that only comes from knowing someone inside out. One evening, as we were unpacking a new batch of groceries, Jamie paused and looked at me with that familiar mix of nervousness and hope. "Do you ever think about the future?" he asked. I thought for a moment. "Yeah, I think about it a lot more now than I used to, and honestly, I want you in it." He smiled, a real full smile that made my stomach flip. "Me too." It wasn't some dramatic declaration or grand gesture. It was quiet, real, and everything I'd been waiting for without even knowing it. Sometimes, the best things start with a wrong pizza delivery and a knock on the door. And sometimes, they turn into something you never saw coming but wouldn't trade for anything. It's funny how life has this way of shifting on a dime, turning small moments into milestones without you really noticing until you're right in the middle of them. A couple of weeks after that conversation in the kitchen, Jamie and I found ourselves curled up on my couch, the city lights painting shadows across the ceiling. We'd just finished watching some random documentary about street art, something I'd never have picked, but he insisted. We were both quiet for a bit, the kind of comfortable silence that comes after a long day and when words aren't really necessary. Then Jamie turned to me, eyes serious but soft. "Hey," he said, hesitating for just a second. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you." My heart sped up because, well, you know how that is. When someone you care about gets that tone, it's like your brain scrambles to prepare for any possibility, from the exciting to the terrifying. "What's up?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Jamie took a deep breath, then looked down at his hands. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about how much you mean to me and how I want to be more than just some guy who showed up with the wrong pizza." I smiled, reaching out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind his ear. "Jamie, you've been more than that since day one." He blinked, like he wasn't quite sure if I meant it, or if it was too soon to say it out loud. Then he swallowed his nerves and said, "I want to move in with you." There it was, the big step, the kind of thing that makes you stop and really think about what you're doing. Moving in together, it's a lot, it's a huge deal, especially when you're still figuring out who you are, what you want, and how to make it all work. But the truth? I didn't have to think twice. "I'd like that," I told him, "more than you know." His face lit up, that nervous excitement turning into pure relief. We spent the next hour talking about logistics, about how to make the space feel ours, about the little things that mattered. It was the kind of conversation that felt both grounding and exhilarating. Then came the weekend of the move. Jamie showed up at my door with a couple of bags and that same shy grin I'd come to love. We spent the day hauling boxes, rearranging furniture, and unpacking memories he'd brought with him. It was chaotic, loud, and sometimes frustrating, but also filled with laughter and moments where I caught him watching me with this look that made my chest tighten. That night, after a long day of moving, we collapsed onto the couch, exhausted but happy. Jamie turned to me and said, "You know, I never thought a wrong pizza delivery could lead to all this." I grinned. Neither did I. As the weeks turned into months, living together felt natural, like something we'd always been meant to do. We developed our own rhythms. The way Jamie always made coffee in the morning and left little notes in the kitchen, the way I'd tackle the laundry and try to cook when he was too tired. We argued, sure. We had moments where we got on each other's nerves or misunderstood one another. But those moments never lasted long, because beneath it all was this deep, steady connection. One evening, we decided to cook dinner together. Jamie was in charge of the pasta while I handled the salad. We danced around the kitchen, bumping into each other and stealing kisses, the music playing softly in the background. At one point, Jamie looked at me with that familiar glint in his eye and said, "You know, I think this is the happiest I've been in a long time." I smiled, feeling the warmth spread through me. Me too. Later, as we sat on the balcony with glasses of wine, watching the city lights twinkle, Jamie opened up about his hopes for the future, not just the immediate stuff, but the big picture. He talked about wanting to travel, to build a life filled with meaning and connection. I shared my own dreams, finally feeling brave enough to admit what I really wanted. We leaned into each other, hands entwined, the silence between us filled with possibility. Looking back, it's crazy to think it all started with a wrong pizza delivery and a simple knock on the door. Life's messy and unpredictable, but sometimes, just sometimes, it throws you a curveball that changes everything for the better. And honestly, I'm grateful for every slice of that unexpected journey. A few weeks after moving in together, I started to notice little things about Jamie that made me fall for him even harder. Like the way he would quietly hum when he was focused on something, or how he'd always leave the windows open just a crack, even when it was chilly outside, because he said he liked the fresh air. I caught myself smiling more these days, often without even realizing it. One Sunday morning, I woke up earlier than usual and found Jamie already in the kitchen, carefully making coffee. The smell of it filled the apartment, wrapping around me like a warm hug. He looked up when I walked in, his eyes still heavy with sleep but bright. "Morning," he said softly, pouring a little cream into both our mugs. "Morning," I replied, wrapping my hands around the warm cup. We stood there for a moment, just enjoying the quiet together. Then Jamie broke the silence. "Hey, so there's this art exhibit downtown I've been wanting to check out. You want to come with me later?" I loved that about him. Always discovering something new, always wanting to share it with me. "Sounds perfect. What time?" "Afternoon. We can grab lunch beforehand." The day unfolded with that easy, familiar feeling I was starting to crave. We wandered through the exhibit, Jamie explaining the stories behind some of the pieces, his eyes lighting up when he got excited. I watched him, realizing how much I wanted to be part of those moments, not just as a visitor, but as someone who mattered. Afterward, we sat at a nearby cafe, sipping iced drinks and talking about everything and nothing. Jamie reached across the table and took my hand, squeezing it gently. "Thanks for coming with me," he said. "I don't know many people here yet, but with you, it feels like home." I squeezed back, feeling like I'd never want to let go. "I'm glad you asked." As the weeks went on, we settled into our own little world, a mix of routines and spontaneous adventures. We tried new recipes, binge-watched shows that neither of us thought we'd like, and took long walks through the city, sometimes just holding hands and sometimes talking about the future. One evening, we were sitting on the couch, Jamie leaning his head on my shoulder as we watched a movie. Halfway through, the power went out, typical old building quirks. Instead of frustration, we both laughed. "Well, guess it's a candlelit night," Jamie said, standing up to find some candles. He returned with a handful, lighting them and placing them around the living room. The soft glow made everything feel intimate and cozy. We sat there in the flickering light, the silence between us comfortable, almost sacred. Jamie looked at me and said, "I don't want to rush anything, but I think I'm falling for you." My heart skipped a beat. I turned to him, eyes wide but smiling. "I've been feeling the same way." He smiled back, nervous but hopeful. "Good, because I want to see where this goes with you." We leaned in, the world narrowing down to just us and the warmth between our hands. It wasn't a grand gesture, no dramatic confessions or fireworks. It was real and honest. And sometimes, that's all that matters. Life has a funny way of surprising you, especially when you least expect it. From a wrong pizza delivery and a knock on my door to sharing coffee and quiet moments under candlelight, Jamie became my unexpected blessing. The person who showed me that home isn't just a place, but someone. And honestly, I can't wait to see where the story takes us next. Over time, the quiet moments with Jamie became the ones I cherished most. The way his hand fit perfectly in mine during our late-night walks, the gentle way he'd brush a stray hair from my forehead when I was distracted, the soft laughter we shared over inside jokes. These little things settled into the fabric of my everyday life. It wasn't flashy or perfect, but it was ours, and that felt more real than anything I'd known before. One Sunday morning, weeks after that candlelit night, we found ourselves in the kitchen again, this time making pancakes together. Jamie was flipping a particularly ambitious one when it slipped from the pan, landing with a splat on the floor. Instead of frustration, we both burst out laughing, the sound filling the small apartment. As we wiped the mess and sat down with our slightly imperfect breakfast, Jamie reached across the table and took my hand. "You know," he said, smiling, "I never thought a wrong pizza delivery could lead to all this. To us." I squeezed his hand gently. "Me neither, but I'm grateful every day it did." We sat there for a while, just holding on to each other. Quiet, but content. It struck me then how much had changed, from two strangers to something steady and comforting, built on honesty and small moments that meant everything. Later that afternoon, as the sun warmed the room, Jamie and I stood by the window, watching the city move below. He leaned his head on my shoulder and whispered, "I don't know what the future holds, but with you, I'm ready to find out." His words settled deep inside me, a reminder that love isn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. It's about showing up, being present, and choosing each other through the messy, beautiful parts of life. And in that quiet, ordinary moment, I realized that this Jamie, us, was exactly where I wanted to be. Not because it was easy, but because it was real. Sometimes, the best things come when you least expect them. And sometimes, the wrong pizza delivery is just the beginning of the right story.